Good morning, everyone. How are you? My name is Josh Devaney, and I'm a product manager at Atlassian, and my job is to build Rovo experiences. Joining me a bit later in the presentation is Ted Moskalenko, and he's from Kraken. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be showing you how Rovo Skills, agents, and automation can turn hours of manual work into seconds. Ted will walk you through how Kraken is doing this already today. A common sentiment that I hear when talking to customers is that they're hearing a lot about AI making impacts for individuals, but it isn't quite showing up at the team level yet. It's hard to understand the ROI beyond the hours saved for an individual. You might get a solo developer who's really good in a team, or a designer who's now pumping out designs and maybe even committing some code. But it's not often that we hear the entire team is improving as a whole. The latest State of Teams report released by Atlassian a few weeks ago shows that 89% of executives say that speed is up, but only 6% can point to a real impact. So if the problem isn't execution and it's not speed, how can we actually start addressing this? We believe that we can teach AI our practices, our knowledge, our processes that are custom to us. Every company works differently. Every team inside of a company works differently, which means we need to teach AI our team's context, not the generic context that an AI or an LLM might have. We need to enable AI to be able to act autonomously on behalf of our team, and we need to do that in a safe and secure way. We believe we can do this with a few AI building blocks. Tools are what AI can do, whether it's creating a work item inside of Jira or in a non-Atlassian tool like Figma or Teams. Skills tell AI how to use those tools in the right way, and agents use tools and skills together to achieve outcomes for yourself and for your teams. Now, many teams have the right tools already. Very few have the skills that they've given to their AI that are custom for their teams. And we're starting to see agents become more common and being deployed for teams, but it's not common practice across the board just yet. It's all a bit abstract when we talk about tools and skills and agents, and I get lots of questions inside Atlassian and outside of Atlassian of what the difference between a tool is and a skill is. So I thought we'd make it a bit more real, and we're going to use a human intelligence example. From time to time, I like to bake some sweet treats. I love to bake cakes and things for my kids when it's their birthday. Here I am in my AI kitchen. I'd like to think about myself as a slightly above beginner baker. I've cooked some cakes in my time. So let's use me, someone who kind of knows their way around a kitchen, as an example of an agent. I have access to a lot of tools and ingredients. You can see that I have my mixer, my spatula, I have an oven, I have a tray to put things on if I'm baking, depending on what it is, if it's a cake, etc. Now, with my knowledge of baking, my beginner knowledge, and these tools, do you think I would be able to make macarons? Maybe some of you are familiar with these. These are the little sweet, incredibly flavorful, fruitful treats you can get at French patisseries. Have any of you ever tried to make one? Any hands up? Okay, we've got like 3 or 4 hands. It turns out they look very simple, but they are devilishly hard to make. It is very easy to make a mistake. If you have ever tried, I hope yours worked out better than mine. Here's a recreation of how they turned out. I tell you what, side note, the new ChatGPT image model helped me create some of these slides, and it's very good. I was pretty amazed. They're cracked, they're flat, they're oozing. They look closer to pancakes than they did to macarons. Just having the right tools and a little bit of knowledge about baking did not make me a pastry chef who could make some amazing macarons. As it turns out, you need to follow a recipe very, very closely. If you don't get the mixing right, if it's undermixed, they're going to be cracked. If they're overmixed, they're going to be flat. It's all about getting the right feel. The egg white has some chemistry with temperature and humidity that you need to get right. You need to be super clean when you're doing it. When they come out of the oven, you need to rest them. If you rest them too short, they'll crack. If you rest them too long, they will be dry. And errors compound through this whole process. And so this human intelligence has all the right tools, but it needs to follow the right process. And if this human intelligence doesn't have the right process baked into their training data, they can only guess or take a stab at how to make them. And in this case, it went very badly. The tools didn't change, but the way we used the tools changed. And so you can see here, skills are this layer in the middle that help the agent understand the right way to use those tools for your company, for your team. How do we make our teams better? We need to figure out how to bake our own custom processes, context, and team knowledge into these building blocks so that we can empower the teams we work with to benefit and save hours of time every single week. Today, we'll be focusing on the recipe and the guidance needed for agents to confidently act on our behalf, and this is known as Rovo Skills. Let's quickly dive deeper into what a skill is. It is a modular, reusable component. It's a capability designed to perform a specific task. They provide instructions, just like a recipe for a process, like write a product requirements document in the way my team does it, or provision a laptop to a new employee in the way our company does it. With the ability to use the out-of-the-box skills that we have shipped in the past month or so, or being able to create your own skills in the way that your teams work. You can access skills via Rovo Chat, via agents, our editor, and even inside of our apps. For skills to carry out a task, they pull context across your Atlassian apps and integrated tools through our Teamwork Graph. As you would have heard a lot about yesterday from Mike and Sharif and Tamar in the keynote, the Teamwork Graph is Atlassian's intelligent data layer that maps relationships between work, code, projects, people, decisions, and even history across all of your Atlassian apps and your connected tools. So while many AI tools can read a Jira work item or a Confluence page, the Teamwork Graph enables Rovo to go one level deeper and understand not just your Jira epics and work items, but also similar work items, related docs, and past decisions that impact the current status of the project. This is how skills can carry out your tasks because they have a holistic picture of how your team works to pull from. Let's see how they work in a real-world scenario. Let me introduce you to someone that you might know. Maybe it's even you, a release manager. Every release, they're living in a spreadsheet or Jira. They're looking at Jira product discovery to find out, have we got the right set of features in? They're looking at Jira to see if the stories have shipped. They're looking at Bitbucket or GitHub to find out if the pull request has been merged, if the deployment has gone through, if it's feature flagged for the right customers. Are there any open incidents? Did we write a run book? Have we told sales? Have we told marketing? They're pinging people in Slack. There's a lot going on here. For the purposes of this session, here's a little bit of a simplified workflow of what a release manager might do for a release lifecycle. They need to audit any open Jira work items and understand scope, risks, blockers, etc. They need to draft customer-facing release notes so that customers understand what's coming, and they need to review them with the team. They need to check release readiness, including merge PRs, resolve tickets, deployments, etc. They need to draft stakeholder comms like Slack or email announcements. They need to tell sales. They need to tell support. It goes on and on. There's a lot that has to be done here. Even simplified, it's a full-time job for this person to align everyone, gather the right context, synthesize, update, etc. But what if Rovo could help you do all of this so you can spend your time focused on making the right decision of go, no go, instead of all of the time collecting all of the information? Here's our release manager in chat. They ask Rovo to summarize the latest release status for the Briny Breaker v0.2 using the skill /summarize release. In seconds, the skill pulls context across the Teamwork Graph, Jira stories, pull requests, linked issues, and work items, and delivers a structured summary of release scope, risks, and blockers. and you can even ask it to write a document in Confluence for you. They can also use the /draft release notes skill. Same connected data, but different output. This time it's customer-facing release notes based on your Jira work items, PRDs, etc. What used to take an hour of combing through Jira tickets, wordsmithing prose, is now a first draft very, very quickly. The release manager can review, adjust the tone, and send it to internal teams for review. As you can see here, we can open that and create a page in Confluence so you can easily see the release notes that it's written from your rich information in the Teamwork Graph. This is an example of 2 skills that we have shipped out of the box for all of you and are generally available today. With these skills, there's a pattern. You have a process, a skill encodes that process, summarize a release, draft release notes, and now that skill is available to anyone on the team to use it, versus it all living in one person's head. But as I mentioned, these are skills that we have built for you. Every team has its own custom processes, custom knowledge. So how do you build your own skills that reflect how your teams work and embed them into your workflows? Today, I'd like to introduce custom skills in Rovo. We're sharing a preview of this new feature with you that's coming soon to everyone who has Atlassian Cloud, and it will work across chat, agents, and automation. Let's build one. The next step in the release workflow, which is the release readiness skill from scratch. Using the skill creator skill, they're able to easily create a new skill using natural language from directly within Rovo chat. Within Rovo, our release manager answers a series of questions that Rovo has asked the release manager to make sure that the skill is custom for their process. How should I identify the release criteria? Where should I read this from? How should I handle the final verdict? Should I just give you a little answer, or should I be very, very detailed? And when I write a checklist for you, should it be a high-level summary? Should it be detailed with links? Should it be blocker-focused? You tell me what you need. You can obviously go back and forth here with Rovo, depending on what you'd like. Rovo will then automatically create this release readiness skill, combining these answers with the knowledge it has about your team in the Teamwork Graph. And the best part is you can go straight ahead and test it inside of Rovo Chat. Run it against a real release and iterate, getting it right, simply by asking Chat to update the skill. You're teaching Rovo how your team works, which also adds context that it has to make it even more knowledgeable for your entire organization. As you can see, it has flagged a blocker when I've run this skill, and so I could go off and take action based on that. Now, using the same skill creator process, we're going to create another skill in our release process, drafting internal release comms that gives stakeholders an update on the latest of what's going on, the status, the risk to be aware of, and so on. Rovo asks us who the intended audience is, the source for the report, and what the tone of the communication should be. Then it goes off and creates the skill. Once again, I could go and start using this immediately. Now that you've created a skill that reflects your team process and ways of working, you can share it with the team simply by sending a link. A different teammate can use the same skill for a different release or a different feature, but the process and structure of the output will be consistent. Creating a skill is a little bit like writing a run book. And this is one that gets used every single time for our releases. It means consistency across your team and your teams and your processes. But what if you don't want to ask Chat every single time to do this? What if the release was automatically done and it just happened automatically? The same skill can work with 3 different surfaces with varying levels of autonomy. We've just talked about Chat. You invoke a skill, you can type / the skill name, whatever you've called it, and it will work in Chat, and Chat will take that in and run that skill for you. And it answers a question with a single action. It will also do this implicitly. Sometimes you don't even need to type the / command, and it will work for you. In an agent, you can engage with the agent composed of one or many skills, allowing it to achieve many different outcomes for you. And in automation, your agent runs without you having to remember, based on a trigger you set to kick off a full workflow autonomously. Agents and automation are the ultimate way to get leverage from your skills and to save your team's time and effort. Let's see how it works. Let's compose a multi-skilled agent and assume we already have an agent called Release Guard. We can add our internal release comm skill that drafts the go, no-go email based on the readiness report, a rollback decision skill. If something goes wrong post-release, it assesses the impact and recommends rollback or not. The release readiness skill that looks at merge PRs, resolve tickets, deployment steps, on-call coverage, and provides a go, no-go decision. Each skill is a building block, and together they form one agent that handles the entire release lifecycle. And now the final level, automation, which lets us assign a trigger to kick off our agent's workflow without human intervention. Here we've assigned a column in our Jira board to our Release Guard agent. So when I drag something across to ready for review, the agent just automatically runs. It can run a readiness report based on the work item. It can even write a go, no-go email draft. And it looks like from this that there are some issues that we have to deal with before we have a full go. We have a conditional go here. The agent assembled context in seconds, identified dependencies, and recommended what we should do moving forward. The release manager can now take this information back quickly to the team and keep the release on track. To take this further, we can build an automation in Atlassian Studio so that this agent can run at 9 a.m. every Monday and give us a status of the latest release and post its output to Microsoft Teams so everyone can see it. Here you can see our natural language builder inside of Atlassian Studio. I simply describe what I want. Studio gives me what I need, and I can say, great, thank you, build that automation for me. And it will come up, and we can easily see that at 9 a.m., we're going to run the release agent, and it's going to send a message of the output from that agent to a Microsoft Teams channel. So we can enable that, turn it on, and then when Monday comes around, we can very clearly see the benefits that this agent has on the whole team. It takes the expertise of one role to build this and build the skills and the process and the automation. But once it's shared with the entire team, they know what's blocking people, what the risks are, what needs to be addressed to make the release a success. Let's step back and see how this came together. We took a look at a release manager's manual multi-tool process. We found existing skills that it can handle in seconds that Atlassian has shipped out of the box that you already have access to. We built 2 custom skills that are unique to your team and how you do things. We composed it into an agent, and then we put that agent inside of an automation, end to end. The possibilities are endless here with the customization that you have. Now imagine if we think beyond just a release manager to any role in your company. IT and service teams, a skill that triages incoming requests using your categorization rules, that has an agent that routes and escalates, automated on every JSM ticket. For legal, we could have a skill that reviews change requests against your compliance checklist. For finance, we could do vendor onboarding checks. For HR, we can answer policy questions based on specific knowledge in our company. Every team has workflows that are repetitive, manual, and very important, but they're tedious. Skills that you teach Rovo how your team works and deploy that intelligence everywhere. But don't take my word for it. I'd love to introduce Ted Moskalenko. Ted is the head of AI enablement at Kraken, which is a cryptocurrency exchange based in the US. Ted has worked with Atlassian tools for over 15 years and serves on our Teamwork Collection Advisory Council. Please welcome Ted.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. So I'm going to tell you a story about how Kraken moved from a legacy DC environment over to the cloud and how we really enabled our teams to leverage some of the power that's available in Atlassian Cloud and Rovo. I'm going to tell you about the journey that we took going over to cloud, how we enabled some of our teams to use Rovo, and I'll give you a couple of examples of how different teams used Rovo to be able to automate some of their processes and get some real ROI on some of this AI functionality that we're seeing in the cloud. So we actually have, the punchline here is, we were on Atlassian for the past 10 years. We migrated over to cloud, and everything changed. And so we're going to talk about some of those use cases in just a minute. But before I get into it, let's talk about what Kraken is. Kraken is a global crypto exchange. We were founded in 2011. We were one of the original cryptocurrency platforms. We have 15 million clients served globally. We work in, or operate in over 190 countries, and we have over 600 digital assets on our platform. Just to take a moment, I come from IT and security, and we are ranked #1 security, and I take that, it brings me a lot of pride to know that I'm working for a company that takes security so seriously. Also, we have always-on infrastructure with over $2 trillion in transaction volume. So, about me. This is of course, AI-generated image from one of my coworkers. They always love that I have my TED Talks on different types of technology. I did work for Atlassian for a few years in technical advisory, worked with some of the very large customers, and helped them both migrate to cloud and optimize their DC infrastructure. I have 20 years of experience in both IT and security. Worked from companies large to small, Wells Fargo, where I just learned yesterday that the environment that I stood up 10 years ago is still operating to this day. And they are working on moving over to cloud as well. About me personally, I'm an avid board gamer. I have over 150 games. I have a spreadsheet. I'm meticulous about it. And I started incorporating AI functionality to be able to keep track of all my games. And I love memes. That's why the meme's in here. And I have 3 cats, and they bring me a lot of joy. And one other fun fact that I didn't put into the slide, but if you Google me, you'll find a time where I actually turned into a meme. It was the top of Reddit for like a day. So I had my 15 minutes of fame. So I joined Kraken back in 2024 as the senior manager for the Atlassian platform. And it's been a wild ride since. First, I stepped into the head of productivity platforms, where I worked with all of our productivity tooling, everything that people were using to get their job done, to track their work and deliver value to the company. And then in 2025, I shifted over to head of IT operations, continuing to do the productivity platform functionality, but also serving all of our IT support teams and all of the IT projects that we had within the organization. And by the end of that year, I stepped into my new role, which is head of AI operations, still doing a lot of Atlassian work. Rovo is a really big portion of our AI usage, but also working with a lot of our other AI tools. So I'm currently under the business operations. I report to the COO, and we have huge projects that span the company and have huge impact. So our Atlassian journey, as I said, started in 2015. That was before I joined the company. We had a bunch of DC instances, Jira Service Management, Confluence. And when I came in, I immediately said, we have to move to cloud. All of the new features are there. This was before the DC shutdown announcement came out. But the writing was on the wall. It was very clear that all of the new features and all of the new capabilities were coming to Atlassian Cloud. And so I immediately started putting together a plan on how we were going to migrate to cloud, put the pitch together, went through all the leadership, got all the sign-offs, and we signed the deal on November 1st. By November 18th, we were already on Confluence Cloud. It was ripping off the Band-Aid in the span of less than 3 weeks. We continued to do the migration over December, and then finally in January, we transitioned our Jira and JSM usage to the cloud, and very quickly turned on some of the AI features. This was actually one of the first AI tools that we brought into our company. And Rovo came later, of course, but allowing at least Atlassian Intelligence for people to use it to summarize pages or to write content, that was a huge unlock to begin with. And then by July, the TWC, actually I think the TWC announcement was at Team that year, it was very clear that there was a good value prop to be able to bring in functionality like Loom and have the higher usage tiers within Rovo. And so I made a pitch, said it's a very good way for us to test out these additional features. And so we signed a TWC enterprise deal by July of that year. And as of today, we have a huge Rovo consumption. I'll provide a lot more details on later slides, including our insights. But we have about 30,000 monthly executions at this point, with over 100 agents on the environment. And I think the punchline here is really important. We didn't move to cloud because Rovo was there. We actually moved to cloud because of the security features, the availability, the integration, and then we discovered some of the capabilities that were available within Rovo. So let's talk about how we build Rovo Skills. I think the really important aspect here is there's a lot of fear about how AI tends to kind of go off the rails and do its own thing. And the key here is that you need to start with something that is like a kernel of truth. What is the problem that you're trying to solve for, right? Find the friction within your processes or the things that you're working on. Find the people that can actually help you refine that and explain what the friction is within that process. Find the knowledge. If the knowledge is not there, build it. The context is really important for you to have effective Rovo skills or Rovo agents that are going to do things for you. Then build something. I think Ethan mentioned it during his keynote presentation. You just have to try it. You have to build something, try it out, see what it can do for you. It's not going to be right the first time. Iterate on it, refine it, change the prompts, change the skills, change the knowledge, until you get to the point that you actually have a shippable product that everyone can use. And then finally, scale. I'm going to show you a couple of examples where we shipped something very early, tested it out, figured out how to do it the right way. We learned some new features as Atlassian unlocks new things, especially the presentation today. Some of these things we don't even have in our environment. We're going to start using them once we do start seeing them within the environment. We can continue to iterate and scale up our functionality. So I'm going to talk about 3 specific examples today, but I just want you to know that I've done a tour of all of these different functions, the different teams. These are not just engineering teams. We have finance, travel, people, IT, marketing, engineering, legal. All of these teams are finding a way that they can actually create Rovo agents of their own, use the context that's available within Confluence, within Jira, within JSM, and all the other connectors that we've enabled, and create effective Rovo agents that help them scale their work. So when it comes to Rovo adoption, there's really 3 key elements here, right? AI is built in, knowledge at scale, and can be built by anyone. There are 3 other elements that I also want to highlight, is that at our company, we are very Slack first. And so it was very important for us to be able to use these Rovo agents, not just within a browser, but also to be able to use them in Slack. And that's something that we did eventually get an unlock for. We participated in the beta program, we provided feedback to them, and we started seeing the refinement of Rovo capabilities within Slack. Jira and Confluence are our sources of truth. All of our information about our company roadmap, the things that our engineering teams are working on, the intake that's coming in for JSM teams, IT and people team. It's all inside of those 2 contexts. And so if it's not there, it's not real, right? It's a very important context source for all of our Rovo agents. And because we are an enterprise, BYOK was a very important component to know that from a security standpoint, all of our information was safe within the Teamwork Graph. And so we enabled quite a few connectors that further scales up the capabilities that we get from Rovo. So as I mentioned before, we're on a lot of EAPs, a lot of betas. You guys may not have seen something like this before, but this is something that's available within the Atlassian Cloud Admin platform. It actually gives you insights into how much your organization is using Rovo. And so I want to point out a couple of things on here. First of all, the chart on the right-hand side is a 3-month snapshot. It does give us 4 weeks, 3 months, 12 months. I figured 3 months would be the most relevant to the conversation today. And you can see that we have 95,000 Rovo interactions with a split across Confluence and Jira representing about 75% of the data, or 75% of the interactions, with Rovo extension, Home, Slack, JSM, Studio, and a very long list of additional functionality, or additional interfaces. Our total organization is 3,500 users, and you can see we have 3,435 users enabled with AI. Everybody's enabled. And we have 2,900 active users over the past 3 months. So it's a very actively used feature within our platform. And then on the bottom left-hand side, you can see what our AI usage breakdown looks like. So I've heard a couple of stories from a variety of different teams of how they did not know where information was, and they just go straight to the Rovo interface and just type out a question. Rovo does the searching for them, finds the answer, gives them the answer, and then also gives them the sources. And that's been a huge unlock, especially for things like security audits. I heard directly from our head of security saying that Rovo made this audit a whole lot easier than it has been in the past, because we did not have this ability to be able to find the information, find the references, and then find the people that wrote those documents in order to be able to get additional detail as needed. And so in our breakdown, you can see, first, I'll start with about a year ago, we had about 7,500, interactions per month, and we've continued to increase. And I want to point out there's 2 spikes here. In July 2025, that's when we had the Slack feature turned on. So we started seeing a lot more adoption of Rovo in Slack. And then the next bump you'll see in December, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, that's when our impact cycle is. or performance review cycle. And so one of the three agents that I'm highlighting today is specifically about how our people team created an agent to help out with impact reviews. And since then, it's just been a continued uptick because we've seen more features enabled and more capabilities that people are looking for. Another thing, down at the bottom, that little blue sliver, that is automations. We're finally seeing the power of being able to call on Rovo bots, or Rovo agents within an automation rule for the Rovo agents to perform some sort of action automatically within those Jira tickets or within Confluence pages. So I'm going to jump into our use cases. And the first one I'm going to get into is called Chad GPT. I love this one. Chad is one of our security training leaders, and he built something that is intended to make it easier for us to scale our Ask Security channel. And down at the bottom, I wrote productively paranoid. This is one of our company values. I tried to tie each of these different agents that I'm presenting on to our 8 tentaclements. I'm forgetting how to say it, but the values of our company. And so in this particular agent, he was able to tie knowledge to skills and then provide answers to questions as they're coming in. So let's talk about what it was like before and what it was like after we launched our agent. In our Slack channel, Ask Security, we have a variety of different questions that come in. Can I use this software? Can I install this application? Can I go to this website? Is this email safe? The list goes on and on. And the problem with it was that whenever those questions came in, somebody would have to answer them. Somebody with the knowledge, somebody from the security team ideally. In some cases, we would have peer-to-peer people answering questions. Sometimes they got it right. Sometimes we would have to refine it. But it was, in very many cases, the same kind of question. And so if there was some kind of software that went down, maybe our VPN's not working. We would end up getting a ton of pings about VPN being down. Right? And it would happen week after week. And then there were times when those questions would come in when maybe the specialist is not online. And so what are we supposed to do? Well, we're going to have to wait until they come online because they will know the answer to that question. We also did not do a great job of being able to maintain the answers within Confluence as discussion happened within that channel. And so some of that context was lost even if there was an in-depth discussion within the Ask Security channel. And then also, anytime a question came in that was hot, that needed a very quick answer, security would have to be pulled away from whatever they were working on. It was interrupted. It was causing context switching issues. After we launched the agent, we were able to get answers automatically serviced directly from our underlying context. We could trust that those answers were correct. Now, we actually have metrics, and I'll show you how effective those answers have been. We also now have the ability to be able to update that Confluence content after decisions or discussions come up within the channel. And coverage spans beyond just that 9 to 5 period when Chad was online. So first, I'll show you what the Chad GPT agent looks like. I think the most important thing to call out here is the tone. Chad loves the idea of being able to express complex problems in a very simple way, in a way that people can understand and not feel like they're overwhelmed. And so he wrote this in a way that's intended to be friendly, expert guidance in information security, and you can see that there's the concept of being productively paranoid and approachable. Within the agent itself, we generally just rely on the default scenario. And the default scenario, again, highlights it's a friendly expert guide in information and cybersecurity, and the concept of productively paranoid, again, is highlighted here. We're leveraging 4 specific skills: being able to send messages to Slack, update the state of Confluence pages, get messages from Slack, and then also edit Confluence pages. And then also, I intentionally collapsed the knowledge, but you can see that there's 2 custom knowledge sources where we were able to point specifically to our IT and security knowledge base, and another source that Chad uses for keeping up to date with what's happening with projects. So I asked Chad, I'm like, tell me how I can actually present this in a way that's impactful and people understand. And so he kind of gave me like the back of the napkin calculations. He's like, for every single question that we have coming in, it's probably going to take us about 5 to 12 minutes, roughly, to get the context, understand, formulate a response, and then provide references. And we do see about 5, maybe 10 topics per day. That equates to about 3 to 5 hours a week, or even 12 to 20 hours per month of expert time answering these questions. And in many cases, it's repeating the same questions, like I said before. And about a third of those messages came in before 9, before Chad was even online. So people would have to wait for those. And this is a quote directly from Chad. The real multiplier isn't in the minutes, it's in the interruption cost. How much time you have to spend getting that answer, being taken away from whatever it is that you were working on previously. So to highlight a couple of the insights here, you can see that over the past 9 months, we've had about 815 conversations, and it's been pretty consistent. You can see the dip during winter break. And you can see that our average daily users has continued to increase, where we're now getting closer to 5 to 6 daily users. And then the feedback score, there's actually a thumbs up and thumbs down. Now, initially, Chad thought that that was actually going to give the bot better context. And I mentioned to him, this is just purely informational. It doesn't actually change anything. But later, we actually were able to include the skill that updates pages. And so now Chad goes in there and says, update the page with this new context, with this new knowledge. And that's how we keep our Confluence information up to date. But you can see that our feedback scores are about 78% thumbs up, right? So that means that 8 times out of 10, this bot's actually getting the right answer. And then this is just a summary of how the numbers stack, right? We had 300 Slack threads per month. 80% were resolved by ChatGPT. The median time to answer went down from 4 hours down to 12 minutes. And it's 100% coverage across time zones. So moving on, next one I want to get into is knowledge retention. As I mentioned, we're a very Slack-first organization, and so a lot of our discourse happens in Slack. And because we are a regulated environment, we need to be very careful with our data retention policies. And so our data retention policy for Slack for many years had actually been 6 months by default for most channels. We actually went through restructuring it. We changed the retention period, but we also wanted to make sure that even conversations that are older than that, we have some way of retaining the context. And so that's where this use case comes in. And to tie it back to our values, this is innovative and assuming best intent. So prior to the launch of our agent, we would lose context. The short retention period meant that we would lose history. As it scrolled off past the retention period, it would disappear. If somebody wanted to keep some sort of information, they would have to either screenshot it, copy it, drop it into Confluence to make sure that it would stick around. And then you would also lose time searching for that context because it would be in some channel, maybe you don't remember where it was. After we launched it, there was a minimal change to human behavior. They didn't have to do too much. We gave them very clear instructions on how they can take that content and save it in a page. And they can save just the key details. They can get a summary. They can see who was involved in those conversations, what was discussed, who said what, why a decision was made, and our Slack retention rules don't have to change. But it lets us keep just the key conversations. So I actually have 2 agents here that I'm showing. One of them is from one of the guys in the audience, Nick. He actually sent it to me. He's like, hey, here's another agent that we built. It's very similar, but in a very slightly different way. So the one on the top left is the original agent. This is the Slack thread capture agent. And the idea here is that it's just taking information from that thread. Anybody can drop a link to a Slack thread, and it will summarize it, capture the Slack names, not the Slack IDs. I learned that the hard way. And then create a Confluence page. Or if a Jira ticket is provided, it will put it as a comment within that Jira ticket. And so the default behavior was for it to save in that person's personal space. But if they provided a link saying nested under this page, it would then put the context of that Slack thread within the page. And then the one on the right is the Slack enrichment agent. And the idea here is that we can run these through automation rules, as Josh mentioned earlier. And we can have the agent pull in whatever context is within the Jira ticket. So if somebody puts a Slack thread inside of the description, the agent's able to pull all that information from that Slack thread and also include that context. Diving into the skills that are available, and just I'll note that this is now changing with what Josh presented earlier, that these are now called tools, but the prior name was skills. For the Slack thread capture agent, we had capture or create page, comment on work item, get messages, and create a page. And then the Slack enrichment agent, we're actually leveraging the Slack MCP, which we've enabled as another connector to get even more information from those Slack threads. All right, next up, final use case, CrackMate. This is our people team. They built a performance review bot that helps create self-reviews, manager reviews, and peer reviews much more quickly. And so the values here are globally inclusive and collaborative. Prior to launching our agent, what we found was that there were a lot of disjointed reviews. Limited writing, because we're a global company, there's varying degrees of comfort in writing lengthy reviews. There was a lack of alignment to our competencies, and we had inconsistent use of our frameworks. We have something called an Atlas framework, not to be confused with Atlassian's terminology, but it's the various competencies within specific roles. And then after we launched the agent, we were able to have more consistent quality performance reviews, behavioral competency model alignment, better alignment with the review prompt, and faster performance cycles. So we were able to shorten the performance cycle because we gave people the tools they needed to write their reviews faster. So CrackMate has 3 scenarios: peer feedback, self-evaluation, and manager evaluation. The idea here was that people can use it to write their self-evaluation, provide that to their managers, and then later the managers can use that context with whatever additional context they have to write their reviews. One thing that I did is I actually recorded all of my one-on-ones with all of my direct reports with Loom, and I was able to create an additional agent that I'm not presenting on today, which is to scan all of my Loom notes and summarize all the things that I talked about with each of my direct reports so that I could pass that into CrackMate and then write my report even faster. It made my life a whole lot easier. And so you can see under the knowledge section, we have a bunch of different resources: anytime feedback, our values, our competencies, and the skills were to create a Google Doc and to create work items. So let's talk about insights here. You could probably guess when our self-evaluations were due. It was right at the end of December. And you can see that huge spike in usage. And then the manager reviews were due in the middle of January. And so you can see a second spike that follows later. So those are the 3 examples I wanted to provide. ChatGPT for security answers, Slack enrichment for capturing knowledge within Slack, and CrackMate for shortening and improving the performance review cycle. And so just to summarize what you should do to implement this within your space is: 1, find the friction, connect the knowledge, ship, measure, iterate, and scale the playbook. And understand that this is not something that only engineers can do or only IT can do. It can be done by anybody within the organization. Come on back, Josh.
Ted, thank you so much for presenting today. Think about the building blocks of AI: tools, skills, agents, what Ted and I have talked to you about today. How to bake your team's knowledge and custom processes into them so that you can save your team hours of time every single week. Let me leave you with 3 things. 1, skills are a new building block that we're introducing. Reusable AI capabilities that encode your team's expertise. They work across chat, agents, and automations, all powered by the Teamwork Graph. Coming soon, you'll be able to build your own skills with the AI tools that you already use or on top of Atlassian and inside of Rovo Chat, and you can bring them to the platform. And 3, just like Ted said, start small, pick your painful workflows, turn them into skills, build agents, automate them. That's the path from AI novice to an AI native team. And maybe one day, this human intelligence, will figure out how to make these devilishly hard little guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day.